So the last thing that I want to touch on is, so we've got this login page. Granted, it doesn't do anything at the moment, but how do we get a login button up in our menu? How do we start to customize the app beyond just building these pages we want to be able to navigate to? So to do that, we go back to our project, stop my debugging, and it's not done within any particular controller. It's actually under the Solution Explorer. It's under Views, but it's under the Shared Views. And it's the _layout.cshtml. If you remember from earlier weeks, this is that space that is that template, that Chrome, that layout element of your web page. All of your pages incorporate or utilize this layout by default. So from within here, there's a fair bit of markup that is utilizing that Bootstrap functionality. So at the very top, we've got the header and the HTML, and then you can see the body tag where it starts, comes all the way down, the render body method, which is where your view page gets rendered out, and then further down is the footer and the actual end HTML. But we also have some of these script renders in render sections. So let's just kind of walk through a little bit to talk about all the pieces and how they work, so that you know if you want to swap out that style sheet framework for something else, or you want to change out your JavaScript, how do I do that kind of a thing, and then talk about the customization. So at the very top, we have styles.render, 2 lines, or I'm sorry, one is styles.render, one is scripts.render. Within ASP.NET MVC, there is a bundling mechanism that allows you to take physical files from the disk and bundle them in such a way that they end up becoming one HTTP request. And that's good for a couple reasons. One, it lowers or minimizes the number of HTTP requests that your browser has to make to the server. So it's less load on the server, less load on the client, waiting for the page to load. So that's one. 2 is that it actually goes through a compression process where it removes all the comments, removes all the white space, streamlines the content so that it's the smallest it can be without performing any real compression. And that all happens as part of this bundling process. Now, what happens is when you define a bundle is you give it an alias, because it could represent a whole collection of files. It's not just one file. So what you're seeing here is there's a style bundle that's called content/CSS. And we're rendering that style bundle there, followed by the modernizer JavaScript, which is getting rendered underneath that, which is a secondary. Further down are additional bundles for things like, I think it's jQuery and stuff like that. Yeah, jQuery scripts are rendered, there's the Bootstrap scripts that are rendered, and then this render section scripts allows us on our own view to put our own scripts into the view, and then they get actually rendered out here. So after jQuery and Bootstrap get loaded, then our scripts can get embedded. If you try to do it up here somewhere, it lands where the render body is, at which point, depending on your script and how it's written, may try to make a jQuery call to jQuery that hasn't been loaded into memory yet. And therefore, you just get a runtime error in the browser. So that order of load is important. Now we'll get into the bundling in a lot more detail, but just so you have a sense of where it lives, if you go back to your project and you open the app start, you'll see there's a CS file in here called bundle config. And what these are your bundles. So here's the jQuery bundle, and what it's doing is it's saying this is the alias, and in that alias, that bundle include anything that lives in the scripts folder /jQuery dash, and then this version is basically a token. It says there's some sort of version notation that's going to exist there. So if you go and upgrade your jQuery, you don't have to go back and touch your bundles. It just knows that, oh, if there's some number type notation there, that's fine. It's kind of like the poor man's regular expression.
jQuery validator, same idea. It's jQuery.validate and then star, so something. It's saying include all of those scripts. Modernizer is here as well. So again, same similar notation. Bootstrap, there's actually two JS files. There's bootstrap.js and respond.js, and they're both included. Content/CSS includes the Bootstrap
CSS style sheet, and then there's a site.css that comes as part of the template. That is your CSS file to do with what you want.
And then this enable optimizations
is the part that tells it to go in and actually perform the compression on the content that is included in the bundle.
Now there's a note here that says that it's false for debugging,
So when your app is running in debug mode, the bundling occurs. The optimization, that removing comments and white space, does not occur. And the reason for that is if you're still working on your JavaScript and it goes to minify it, all your formatting and stuff that makes it easy to read all goes bye-bye. And typically your scripts usually end up being like one giant string of text across your window. You can debug them, but it's not recommended.
so that's enabled by default,
But when you're running in debug mode, it's disabled. Like it inherently sees that you're in debug mode and turns itself off. But when you do a release build and compile and you actually push it out to a server, it'll enable itself and then does the optimizations. So you can come in here and add, following their conventions, you can add any script files you want. So if you want to take out jQuery and replace it with something else, or take out Bootstrap and replace it with something else, this is the space to do it. So within the layout.cshtml, your navigation actually exists inside of these navbar div tags. That's what they're there for.
the nav bar itself has, so the bar, just the bar, is nav bar inverse, nav bar fixed top. All three of those classes together generate just the bar. Then there's this container. The container has to do with the responsive design of Bootstrap and gives, if the, let's see, how do I put it? If the device is too narrow, it will respond by collapsing the menu into one of those little, some people call them the hamburger button, 3 bars. And then you click that and then it opens up. So if you load it on a phone, it collapses your UI into just that button, so you don't have to put this long bar across the top. So that is there as an element to actually render out that bar. So that's why it's a button wrapped in a navbar toggle, and there's just a lot of stuff here.
It's all on getbootstrap.com if you're really interested in the specifics.
But move down further, here is the navbar itself. So here is your home button, your about button, and your contact button. And again, they're utilizing the HTML helper for action links. And
we'll actually add one. So it's an unordered list, so we'll just follow that convention. So we'll do li html.actionLink. And when we go in there, we'll see that there is actually, well, there's a lot of different overloads, but the one that I'm interested in showing you today is this one. It takes in 3 strings. Linked text, that's the text that gets output on the screen, action name, and controller name. So for us, I'm going to differentiate this just so visually. I'm going to put sign in, and then login is the name of my action for my account controller, and then the controller name is account. That's it. And what happens is that action link says, okay, this is the action, this is the controller. It verifies that they exist, generates the correct link tag, a tag, for that URL based on where you are in the site. So it actually generates a relative URL. So if you're 10 layers deep, it's going to generate a URL that takes you 10 layers back and then brings you to the account controller. Or if you're inside the account controller, it'll just generate one that says /login. Actually, it's just login, there's no slash. Anyway.
And then the text that will show up is the text
Sign in.
So I'll make a save. We'll jump back and refresh. And there's our sign in button. So we can go home. You can go sign in. And there you go.